Welcome to the regular Oscoda Township Board meeting for November 13th, 2017. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Cummings.
Here.
Ms. McGuire.
Here.
Mr. Gasky.
Here.
Mr. Palmer.
Here.
Mr. Nordine here. Mr. Byer.
Here.
Mr. Weed.
Here. Agenda additions. Do we have any?
We have one, that would be the natural gas contract from CenterPoint Energy.
Okay. And I have one for moving the board comment for resolution number change up to other. So if we can move the resolution change to number 6 and other, and natural gas at number 7. Is that good? Any other changes or additions? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Agenda is set. Now we shall go into the public hearing for ordinance 2017-260 regarding medical marijuana. I need a motion.
I'll make a motion, we go into public hearing.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, we are now in public hearing. For this public hearing, anyone may speak. There is a 4-minute time limit. You come up and speak, please come up to the podium and introduce yourself. Do we have any cards for the public hearing first?
We do have one,
Okay.
Deborah Jackson.
Okay, we'll start with. Okay. Does anybody else want to speak?
Well, that's certainly I'm Deborah Dexel. I live in East Tawas. And I really came because there's been so much commotion in the community about establishing a medical marijuana dispensary that I wanted to come and talk to the community because I've talked with them. And I want to start first by saying that I understand the biggest problem is the stigma that we deal with in this community with cannabis. And the only way we're going to get through that stigma is through education. Just to give you a little bit of a background, the statistics for the fiscal year ending of 2016, this is found at michigan.gov/documents/Lara, is that in our 7 county surrounding area, and that's Alcona, Alpena, Aranac, Gladwin, Iosco, Ogama, and Oscoda counties, we have 3,613 people under this program, and that number is growing every year. The only people that are allowed on this program are those with debilitating conditions. 79.99% of the people under this program are categorized as under severe and chronic pain. 3,613 people do not have access to quality medicine in a safe environment. The closest dispensary that gives us both a safe environment and quality medicine is down in Ypsilanti. For me, that's a 10.5-hour drive. It is arduous, it is long, I am lame for days afterwards, and I do not go alone because I can't handle that drive. Some have thought it's a simple inconvenience, and I am telling you it is everything opposite of that. It is a hardship. Many people cannot go there. They don't go down to Flint, which has dispensaries, but there is no place in Flint that is safe, and I will not go there alone. So we do the long drive. Those that can't make that long, arduous drive are forced to go to backyard growers who are licensed in Michigan to grow cannabis for us, but nobody has a clue what's in that medication. So we are at their whim of whatever they've put into it. To get a dispensary in here, means it's under a strict regulation, and we have a shot at getting quality medicine and not having to drive hours. It keeps us off of opiates. I have no problem getting opiates for my condition. The problem is opiates don't like my body, and the last time I had to go under them in May of this past year, I was put into emergency surgery, hospitalized for 2.5 weeks, and it's been a long haul back, and that was 3 weeks after a major surgery on my shoulder. I personally have had to undergo chemotherapy 3 separate times. I've had 8 surgeries on the abdomen alone. I am 1 out of 3,613 people with a debilitating condition that the cannabis allows us not to be under opiates and narcotics. It does not handle the severe pain that I ran into coming out of a first surgery, but I am very blessed to still be here. We need the laws put in place that will protect the cannabis dispensary and fall them under the same guidelines as a pharmaceutical dispensary, because we live in this community too. We are asking for help. We are turning to our community for help. We are in pain. We are the least of God's children, and we are asking you to please help us, because we don't have access to medication anywhere close by. We use this because the opiates and the narcotics are so hard on our systems that I can't function. But I can function under cannabis, and I'm not a threat to society, and we just need to educate our community that we have people here in need. And please do not be afraid on a stigma. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak? Anything from the board? All right, then I need a motion to come out of public hearing.
So moved.
I'll support that. Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call.
Mr. Gasky.
Yeah.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. We are now out of the public hearing. Next is public comments. No cards? We will have another public comment period at the end of the meeting for anybody who did not fill out a card and wish to speak. On to the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything regarding the minutes for work session October 20th, regular meeting October 23rd, and the work session November 2nd? Also for the payment of bills for $232,772.27. And the reports for well repair replacement at Old Orchard Park, Warrior Pavilion floor covering replacement, Township Hall hip roof replacement, and the USDA pre-application submission.
I have Mr. Palmer pointed out this morning to me that the minutes for the work session of October 20th, the heading with the date at the top is incorrect. I have November, so I'm going to make the motion. Can make the motion pending that change. Thank you, Mr. Palmer, for pointing that out.
It says November the 20th.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. So I will be making a correction to make it say October.
Okay. Good catch.
Any other comments? And I need a motion for approving the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion. We approve the consent agenda with the changes that were outlined.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Gajewski. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yep.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Weed.
Yes, motions are passed. Next, for subcommittee reports and project updates. First I have here is the Air Force meetings that occurred 2 weeks ago, on the Wednesday of 2 weeks ago. That was the same day of the community health meeting. I'm sorry, that was the same day as the RAB meeting. The Air Force had called for a meeting that would be between all the agencies involved with selecting a location for the GAC plant. So we all discussed everything. They had maps up there. We told them that where they currently wanted it was not a good location because that's a prime piece of real estate for a decent-sized industry to move into. There's no other property on the base that accommodates that much room. So they seemed okay with looking into the other areas, but they had also called for a meeting. They wanted a meeting just to speak with the airport authority director and a meeting just to speak with myself. We told them that we weren't good with that. If they were going to have a meeting like that, then it needed to include both the airport and the township together. In that meeting, we discussed further about the locations. We told them that if they were going to tap into the storm sewer system, that we would then want some sort of lease rate on that, because they would then be utilizing it more than it was designed to do.
Right.
Not that it couldn't handle the flow, it's just not designed for that constant kind of use. And if they were gonna select that large piece of property, then we would want a lease on that. They said they wanted to put in a location that was gonna be completely free of cost. So later in this meeting, we will then discuss that further regarding the 4 alternate locations. Any questions on that one?
I have no questions, but I do have the same comment that I raised at the RAB meeting, which was fortunately included in the last Oscoda press issue. And that was that I was annoyed, to put it mildly, that the Air Force refused to let me participate in that 1:30 meeting. Because if I'm representing the township at the RAB meeting, how can I represent the township when they're having basically a closed-door meeting with all due respect, yourself and Mr. Stalker? There it is.
Yep. Yeah, we thought it was kind of an odd situation for arranging that meeting too, but
Yes, and I understand from Mr. Mars that this was unintentional, and it wasn't, my point here is not to put you or Mr. Stalker in an uncomfortable position. You guys were unwittingly the victims of a situation where Mr. Mars' boss, Mr. Tarmath, Dr. Tarmath, decided to change an agenda, I guess, or something, when he had the opportunity to talk to you privately. So,
I was unaware of an agenda change.
well, Mr.
Sounds all a
Mars,
little odd.
Mr. Mars indicated that he was unaware that this was going to be the nature of the conversation, and it had changed. So that was his direct comment to me after the RAB meeting.
Yes.
So, once again, I come back to the Air Force's disingenuousness toward the township with regard to the cleanup of the contamination.
Uh,
We're going to discuss this in more detail later?
Yeah.
In the agenda, okay.
So next on here was an update for the RAB meeting that was later that day. Do you have anything further for that?
No, actually, it was covered well in the Oscoda press. I have nothing further to say. Something specific, I'm happy to take a question about it, but it was very simple. We elected our co-chair for the township. It was Arnie LaRiche, so he was elected. So he's essentially the co-chair for the committee. He represents the community, so he's a community co-chair. He doesn't represent the township. He represents the community folks who are part of the RAB. And we postponed the vote for the operating rules, which govern the way the RAB itself would be operated. So we postponed that for a future meeting. I called for a meeting, the next meeting to be sooner than quarterly, which was proposed by the Air Force. We've been having our meetings roughly monthly, every 6 weeks, and they wanted to shift to quarterly. Once again, a sidebar with Mr. Mars, where he said he really wanted the township to understand and begged leniency from the township. But I said, the fact of the matter is here, the reason why it's so expensive is because you're bringing such a large entourage of private consultants and staff to this particular meeting. So I hate to say it, but I don't feel a whole lot of sympathy for his budget problem.
All right, anything else? All right, next I have is for the AKT Peerless meeting, who is our consultant regarding this contamination issue. In this case, it was a meeting regarding marketing so that the township could combat the negativity that comes from the connotation we receive from having this contamination. I think it went well. We got some good ideas on how to market the area, but we're going to have another meeting to determine some sort of game plan and then be able to bring that to the board so we can get some sort of firm direction.
Good. As a point on the AKT Peerless, I always forget how to say the acronym there. They're also working with you, Mr. Stalker, on how we're going to present RAB and water contamination related information to the public. Is that coming up, or what are they recommending, I guess is the question.
Correct. That will be included with that.
Big conversation. Good. Thank you.
The other item I have is that I made a showing at a radio talk show down in Lansing, the Steve Gruber Show. It was about 18 minutes long, and a few hours later, DEQ gave me a phone call, which is pretty rare. And they expressed some concerns, and I expressed concerns back at them. So I think that conversation went well with educating one of their deputy directors to the nitty-gritty details that we have going on here. The other one is EMS response presentation with the county. I asked to be put on their agenda for today's county meeting. They denied that. They said that I was to speak at their EMS subcommittee meeting, that their regular meeting was not a place to discuss it. I felt that it was, so I went there anyways this morning. I made sure all the board members had the data, and however they wanted to work it from that point was up to them. But hopefully we can get something resolved with these long EMS response times. I did make it clear it was nothing against EMS personnel, because I think they are doing the best they can with what they've been given. The other one is the OCC survey.
Yes, well, now this is a much happier topic than the ones I've been speaking of so far. First of all, I'd like to say that with the Oscoda Community Center, OCC, there was a survey conducted over the summer that ended on September 7th. During that time, we collected 159 responses. 150 were online, 9 were handwritten responses, which I personally manually entered into the online survey system so we could tabulate the results. I provided a summary of these results to Jenny for the Oscoda Press and to the board. I just want to run through a few of the points on this list because I think they're important to speak in public about and to have on the recording of the on YouTube for other folks who are going to watch this meeting in the future. The fact of the matter is that the survey was well attended. There was a good result on it. 159 survey results is not bad. First of all, 140 respondents, which was 88%, stated that they lived in Oscoda Ensemble. So the survey represents very much the heart of this community, which is an important point of the survey. There were other respondents, 5, who stated that they lived in Greenbush, perfectly fine, neighboring community. 3 respondents said that they lived in Mankato, again, perfectly fine, neighboring community. And 2 respondents identified themselves as living in East Tawas and Whittemore. So as we look at the, and by the way, the remaining 9 respondents lived elsewhere, just one community here and there in the area. So 51% of all the respondents were in the 60 or older group. And this is particularly important to know because being that we have a generally older community, it's important that I found it actually good to see that the OCC was being used by these folks and that it was not something that was only, let's say, being monopolized by teenagers or something like that. In other words, it wasn't just being represented by one group. Everyone was getting a chance to use it. 21% in the 26 to 59 age group, 22% in 31 to 45, almost an even split there, and 6% in the 18 to 31 age group. Incidentally, the reason for this odd age group split is that this is the way earlier surveys were done on the OCC in the past, and we were trying to keep this survey such that we could compare the results to earlier survey results. So there was obviously a missing respondents from the 0 to 11, who we did actually have an option for those people to identify themselves younger, and from 12 to 17. There were no responses at all. So these two age groups need to be heard from as well, and so I'm looking for opportunities for how we're going to make that happen. Certainly be recommending to the OCC subcommittee to get a survey out in front of these folks. I just want to skip a little bit to some of the things that we learned, and that was that if you're familiar with the OCC, there's a product called a punch card, which is an opportunity for you to buy in advance instructor-led classes. By doing so, it saves you money. Turns out that 65% of the respondents didn't realize that it saved them money, and they didn't realize that by paying in advance and coming to one of those classes, that on that day they would also get a free pass to walk in and do other things within the OCC. So it wasn't just like they could go to the lead class and then leave. They actually had access to the rest of the facilities. Let's see, another couple here is there appears to be a solid following for the OCC, with 46% of the respondents planning to purchase memberships this year. 46% of 159, we've easily exceeded that number. So again, this survey seems to be accurate. 22% of respondents were considering purchases of day passes and instructor-led classes this year, which is good. I mean, we'd like to see more people with memberships because it's actually cheaper, but it's good that people are at least considering day passes as an alternate. The top two reasons why respondents said they might not purchase a membership this year were an unfamiliarity with what the OCC has to offer, and that they reside out of town during the winter. We can't fix that one. But with the unfamiliarity point, confusion about day passes and an unfamiliarity about what the OCC has to offer is certainly something we can handle by doing a more effective job of informing the public. So there's an opportunity for better promotion and advertising here for the OCC. Let's see, wanted to jump down to a particular point here, the very last one, for those of you with a copy, and that on the survey there was a huge surprise to a question that I posed kind of at the last minute on a whim. It had to do with the idea of concerts at the OCC. An interesting concept. We have two very large gyms there, and each with bleacher seating. So it turns out that 57% were interested in this, which is actually compelling. That's a lot of interest. Only 12% showed no interest, which means that 31% were unsure, and by being unsure, that means that they could swing to a yes or a no. They're kind of what I like to call the swing vote. And so I look at that as that they could be made sure if it was the right type of concert. So anyway, one thing's for sure is that concerts at the OCC shows a lot of possibilities for youth as well as our adult in the community. So anyway, on behalf of the Oscoda Township Board of Trustees and the OCC subcommittee, we thank everyone who took time to answer the survey. And I thank you very much for that opportunity to give you that update.
Well, I guess you're not done yet. We have Develop by Osco meeting.
Oh yeah, right. I'm a busy guy. So Develop by Osco is a group that meets every month. The last meeting we held was at the conference room at the Oscoda Board of Education. And at this meeting, we learned that the website for the Develop by Osco, we had been having difficulties obtaining it in order to renew the website, just due to a variety of issues that the board there was having. They were able to obtain the new website called develop-iosco.org, so hyphen in between the words. This was actually easy for them to obtain. It's not too far from what it originally was. It works. So now they're working on what the content's going to be. And there's been a lot of discussion amongst the board, and I'm not on the board for that. I'm part of the kind of the audience, just part of the membership. But the board has been trying to basically work out their identity. Who are they? What are they trying to do? And find a way to be more effective in what they want to do. The Showcase IOSCO Expo that occurred last month wasn't as well attended as they would have liked. Don't think that was necessarily due to anything they specifically did or didn't do, but it was a series of unfortunate events, which was covered well in the Oscoda Press article as well, again, as I mentioned. And so so they're looking for a way to basically find a way to take all this interest that we in the communities of Iosco County are trying to help the communities with economic development. So that's a little summary, little update on the website, and I guess at this point there's a whole lot of opportunity for things to come down the pike in the future, and I'll bring those to you as they occur.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The Michigan State Health Department has arranged or scheduled the next community health meeting regarding PFAS contamination. It will be on December 6th at the Sacred Heart Church on US 23. Does anybody else have any committee reports or project updates?
Well, I'd like to mention a little bit from the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission's been very busy the last several months. At our last meeting, we had 3 cases that were reviewed. One was a rezoning of the, on F41, the property behind the party store, which is zoned mobile home. Anybody's probably familiar with that area. We were suggesting rezoning that to R3. We ran into a little snag with that, so we've kind of tabled it for the time being. We're getting some more information. 2 other cases. One was a special land use and business reoccupancy. This brought up a significant point as it relates to what we've talked about earlier in changing the zoning in the Wordsmith district to align with the district, the regular zoning. Like instead of Wordsmith industrial, just regular industrial. There are some differences there in this business. If that had been zoned industrial, the use he wanted to have would have been clearly defined, but under Wordsmith industrial, it was not so clearly defined, but we were able to kind of work it in under a special use listed in there. But that indicates the importance, I think, to moving forward with this change in the Wordsmith district, to taking the W off and combining these zoning districts to reduce, for one thing, reduce the size of our zoning book, but especially in the industrial area. The Wordsmith industrial is, for whatever reason, is more restrictive on businesses than just a regular industrial zoning in our ordinance. So that was of interest that came out of that. And then there was another site plan review and a business reoccupancy that we passed. And we are also continuing to work on the master plan. Hopefully we'll be having that here soon. We had a few more corrections at our last board meeting. We wanted to, as long as we're going to take the time to get this thing done right, we wanted to have Spicer make the few corrections we found and have the thing the way we want it. We spent this much time and money, we figure we might as well get it right. But we should have that coming to the board within the next month or so. So a lot of things going on with the Planning Commission, and we're moving ahead. So thank you.
Anybody have anything else? All right, then under reports. First is proposed HUSHRA operating budget.
Yes, thank you. The Huron Shores Regional Utility Authority Board of Directors met on November 7th. They took up consideration of a draft budget document, and ultimately a motion was made and carried to recommend approval of that draft to the governing bodies of the member municipalities. thus this item appearing in my report this evening. We're actually ahead of schedule from the authority standpoint as compared to past years. The budget reflects the fact that Oscoda Township will see a modest reduction in our annual contribution, going from $332,000 to $314,000 in round numbers, a drop of almost $19,000. That's basically because there is more cash balance being carried in the draft budget than the current year's budget due to budget underspending. So the way that works, though, is there is a trailing year water consumption calculation. So it's not just about the overall budget number. It's the amount of water each municipality consumes year to year based on that calculation. And it's been fairly consistent for Oscoda Township for some time. So the recommendation from the authority board is that the draft budget be approved. The way the process would work is the budget would go back to then the authority board at their next meeting if all the governing bodies acted on it, and they would take up consideration of final approval. I also had attached a copy of the capital improvement plan for the authority. You can imagine with an entity focused on infrastructure, the capital improvement plan is a big part of the budget. So,
Any comments?
2 questions. There are 5 municipal entities that make up the board, plus Alabaster and Greenbush. Is that right?
yeah, there are actually 7.
Yeah.
But yes,
So my first question is, they're submitting their budget to all 5, right? Or maybe all 7. What happens if 1 or 2 of them don't like it, vote no?
we have never had that happen. Presumably, from the authority standpoint, you would try to be responsive to the concerns and work through it, and then if you couldn't come to total consensus, some kind of value judgment would have to be made about a majority
Yeah.
based on the bylaws. But we've not had that situation emerge, and the goal would be to try and address whatever concern was presented.
So there's nothing in the bylaws of HUSRA that says you need at least 3 out of 5 yeses or anything like that?
I do not believe that that circumstance is addressed.
Okay. I can kind of see where if one town or township doesn't like the quality of their water, too much chlorine in it, tastes like bleach, smells like bleach, something like that would get all bent out of shape and vote no just on 1 or 2 items like that. But I would think that at some point you would want some wording in there that would solve that. Otherwise, you'd be caught. What do we do now? You know. Second thing, question I have is, did all the 5 or 7, whatever number you want to use, see a reduction in their contribution?
No, at least one went up.
Okay. Roughly 19,000. I think that's, you indicate it's a modest. I think that's pretty good. So.
It's better than the alternative, certainly.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That's all.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I move that we voice our approval of the 2018 HUSRA budget as presented.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Ms. McGuire. Any comments from the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, presentation of Township fiscal year 2018 budget, scheduling public hearing.
Yes, thank you. The budget is on the board table, including the revisions that are outlined in the next item in my report. Presuming that we are collectively on the same page as to those revisions, and those are intended to compare the draft budget to the proposed budget, we would then be in a position to move forward in considering the adoption process, which would now require that we consider scheduling a public hearing. We have put a notice together, forwarded it to the newspaper based on the publication timeline. If the board were to approve a hearing for November 27th, the first ad would be published Wednesday in the local newspaper.
Any comments? Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve scheduling a public hearing on the 2018 proposed township budget on November 27th, 2017 at 7 o'clock here in the library.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, budget work session recap and confirmation.
Thank you. I don't know that it's necessary to go through each one of these unless the board feels the need to have me recite them. We had talked about them in terms of the budget changes, and they're fairly straightforward. However, the non-budgetary work session topics, I am seeking affirmation as to accuracy. And that would be moving ahead with an organizational membership with the Michigan chapter, the American Planning Association, for $650. Unfortunately, we've tried to contact our friends at the Michigan Municipal League again, and we still don't have membership cost information available. We could move forward with the Planning Association, however, and then deal with the MML membership at the next meeting. There was also discussion about procuring legal services which are specifically geared to code compliance and zoning planning issues. There appeared to be consensus on the board that that step made sense. That raises a question, if that assumption is accurate as to moving forward, that raises a question as to the process the board would like to follow. Do we have specific firms or attorneys in mind we would like to speak with directly, or do we want to go through some kind of a competitive solicitation process? And then finally, there was discussion about tree cutting services and the potential benefit of soliciting proposals on an annualized basis. At the work session, there was preliminary mention of doing that on an hourly basis. From a staff perspective, after talking about it, the consensus is that the annualized approach would definitely be of benefit, but there is some concern about the hourly approach not being potentially cost-effective for the township. So my suggestion there is that we take some time to evaluate the best methodology upon which to solicit bids, maybe look at what some other communities have done, that kind of thing, and then report back to the board.
Comments?
The number 2 one, are we not happy with our current legal services? I mean, why are we looking at, what's the board thinking there?
To have a firm that specializes in this rather than just a general attorney.
Because we've had issues, or are we just, I mean, you could get a specialized attorney for a lot of things.
I think that if we keep the current attorney to work the big issues, we can hopefully have some good responsiveness with that, and then zoning can work their things without interfering with any other litigation that may be going on. But also, like I said, something specific, a firm that's knowledgeable thoroughly of all ordinances and our own ordinances. I think it'll make it a much more efficient process.
I kind of agree with Jamie. That may shock Jamie, but
Right, it doesn't happen very often, does it,
not,
Jim?
no, it doesn't.
That's okay.
But, I mean, if someone can point to a case where our present township attorney dropped the ball, or we lost a case dealing with zoning and code enforcement, then I would be a little more serious about considering this. But I don't know of any such case where we kind of got screwed up and lost in court because of our present attorney couldn't handle it. And I guess my second thing is, I don't know if there's any attorneys of law firms that specialize in this in near proximity to Oscoda, Michigan. And if you have to go to Saginaw or Flint or someplace like that for such a law firm, then it's not only going to be costly, but you're going to be talking windshield time payment for if they have to come up here and so forth. I should have put those in reverse. That one to me is a biggie. And then say, you know, have we been shortchanged by the present legal? And I don't see that, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not, you know, but until it's shown to me that we're coming up short in this, I'm going to have some serious doubts, so. The organization memberships, number one, Michigan Municipal League won't give you the prices. Even over the phone, that should be a no-brainer. Call them up and say, what does it cost to join?
We have, apparently the person that was responsible for providing that information was out of the office at a conference or for some other reason for a period, and checked again today, and we're still waiting for
Wow.
feedback.
Okay. Is it the will of the board to join every such association, or just determine which one fits our needs the best? The one costs $650, which isn't going to break the township, but that's $650 for an annual membership. What if the other one's $1,000 or something? Can we join them both?
Right.
So, anyway, I'd like a little more information as, you know, what kinds of things they offer. And I don't have a preconceived opinion. I mean, if someone can say, hey, they can do this for you and they can do that for you, I'm fine. But right now, I don't know
What the benefit
what's
is,
out there. Yeah. So, but we did talk about these. You know, this is part of the work session, so I have no problem with that. So,
Yeah, just to point out that on the American Planning Association, one of the benefits there, though it is a $650 subscription, they offer sending representatives here to train us, so that we don't have to send, like, this whole board and pay for food and lodging and travel to go somewhere else for a meeting. They'll come here and meet with us directly, which would easily save $650 for in one session.
Absolutely.
I was looking at the Michigan Municipal League, and the interesting thing I was looking at on there is that the main membership, even though we don't have prices on that, it looked like only primarily cities and villages. There were what was it? 516 out of 533 cities and villages in Michigan were members, but only 3 urban townships. And so the one membership, and the membership that we would be interested in, I think, is called a MML Associate Membership. In this category, is affiliation is open to municipalities incorporated under a Michigan statute of townships, which would be other than urban townships. And because I can't imagine Oscoda would be considered an urban township by any stretch of anybody's
I'll bet
imagination.
they're talking about like Canton Township
Yes.
and, you know,
Yeah.
Redford, or is it Redford Township?
There was a Redford Township. But the interesting thing was that even of those townships, only 3 were members in the MML. So maybe that membership isn't as advantage. I don't know. I would like to know what the fee is for it. There are a list of things you get with that membership. But I thought the planning association would be very valuable in just the part where they will come to us and do training sessions. I think that would be very valuable. So,
The one thing about the planning one that I'd like to know, I could have swore I heard somewhere in our discussions that the idea that they would come to us and train us or on-site staff members, board members, was outside the 650, and I would just be curious to know that before. It's just a recollection, so I'd like to try and nail that down just to be sure in my mind that covers under the 650. But that's
well, I think the point would be there may be a fee for them to come and do that, but it would still be cheaper than sending 7 or 8 people
sure.
somewhere to be trained, and with the expenses that go along with that. I think that's the underlying concept for the whole thing. Whether or not there may be a fee for them to come and do that, but it would certainly be less than what it would cost to send, a whole board to Traverse City or someplace for a training session. So that sounded like a worthwhile investment. Township for $650 a year to have that membership.
Anybody else?
I guess I do have a question of clarification. Is there more to be said about the, regarding the legal representation and looking for another firm? Is there more that you wanted to say, Mr. Weed? I'm not sure, like, what more. I feel like we're missing some information that might help.
I explained it during the work session.
Was there here? I was just looking for here.
Well, I think for maybe to clarify what we had talked about
Yeah.
previously is not that we're certainly not dissatisfied with our legal representation that we have from our existing attorneys, but that we are encountering more and more zoning issues that need to have legal representation, and we felt that we could maybe get a more timely response on those issues
Right.
by having an attorney that would deal just with those concerns. That has certainly nothing to do with any failure of our attorney to perform. It's just he's very busy.
And that could also make the process of revamping our ordinances much more efficient when you have people who have dedicated most of their legal career to this. When I go to the MTA conferences and to their training sessions, there are attorneys who are very specialized into planning and zoning. They know all the current laws that have happened. They know how people perceive things regarding how ordinances are written, how the judges will perceive them.
Right.
I know our attorney knows quite a bit of that also, but
Yep.
with a firm that has a department that specializes in this, or even if it's an individual firm that does this, that, they could have something readily available for us, that minor adjustments, and we could get our ordinances taken care of rather rapidly.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Regarding the MML, I brought that up because while the MTA is good, they're not the entire picture. I've done a lot of legal research over the last 5 years regarding township law, and I found the MML to have a lot of information that is very, very concise and current, very direct about the law. They do offer training, and I think that if we take advantage of all 3 of these organizations, I think that'll help us a lot so that we can make sure we know what we're dealing with when something arises. Having all of our boards educated makes them very effective.
What's our annual dues for the MTA?
I'd be speculating, but I guess I don't want to do that. Without looking offhand, it's several $1,000s, so.
Okay, multiple thousands.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments? Is there a motion regarding this?
Just to answer Mr. Byers' question, roughly $5,000.
5? Okay, thank you.
Do you need a motion on this one or consensus?
For the audience's information, MTA is Michigan Township Association. So,
You get a lot of services for that, though.
yeah. Yeah.
Do you need a motion or consensus?
Well, in terms of the potential payment to the Planning Association, that should probably be a motion, and I would say some level of consensus on the legal services if we're going to, from a staff standpoint, respond. Or we could table it and give everybody a chance to chew on it a little bit. But if we're going to be spending money, I would suggest action, certainly. Sure.
I'm just gonna say I apologize for not being at the work session. I had a family emergency, so I'd like to see us table it just so I can ask a few more questions or speak to some of the other board members.
I'm with you. I had a client emergency come up and I was unable to attend the last one, so I wasn't unaware of this discussion. I know that something was discussed, but I wasn't there for the nature of the entire discussion. So this has been helpful, but it also shows me what I don't know.
On all the issues, or table all of the issues, or
We can do the tree cutting services. I have
Yeah.
questions about the memberships and the legal services.
Thank you. Those two for me as well.
We need more info on tree cutting first, though, right?
Right.
All right.
You have the consensus you need then?
Yeah. I think we've got a trifecta.
All right. Sorry about that.
All right, then on to CVT revenue sharing submission.
Yes, hopefully a little more clear cut. This is a revenue sharing program through the state that includes an incentive component for which most but not all communities are eligible. In our case, given the state fiscal year, which began October 1, the amount that we would be paid is slated to be $17,629 under the program. That is if we submit the appropriate documentation no later than December 1st. You might recall that we had enrolled in the Munitrex software management and reporting service over the past few years. One of the chief benefits of that program is they offer assistance in preparing this documentation, and staff have been working with them for the past few weeks. That results in the document that's attached to my report, which includes an updated citizens guide, performance data, dashboard, debt service report, and projected budget. There's also a certification document, which I note has been modified. The one on the board table under Part 2 does not have, the local unit does not have unfunded pensions checked now, and I thank Mr. Palmer for pointing that out or raising that question. They had checked that box, and for Oscoda Township, it is definitely not applicable. So with that one change, I am looking for the board's approval to submit the reports so that we can meet the program deadline. I note also that we are in the process of preparing a submittal to the Department of Treasury, which it's kind of a mini grant program. Well, they're reimbursed for up to 50% of our fee with Munitrex because they want to encourage presumably local governments to do those types of analyses on their finances. So if we're successful, we'll get the half of the $2,400 fee reimbursed.
Comments?
Please tell me that this $17,629 is only a small part of revenue sharing that we will receive.
Yes.
Thank you.
We would have
How long ago was it that we got over $1 million? And this is state aid. Revenue sharing is a fancy name for Lansing giving money to towns and townships. What was,
I think 2000 or 2001, we got 1.15 million, and we're down to about half of that now.
okay. you know, when I first read this, I thought, holy, 17,000 from 1.1 million?
Yeah.
We'd still be working on the budget.
Yes.
Yes, we would. I want to say thank you for bringing up the question about Munitrex a couple of years ago when I first got on the board. It was one of the first topics that we discussed, and I really, it's come up a number of times over the last couple of years, and it's nice to see that this has been a worthwhile investment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments?
I move that we move ahead with this. Deadline December 1.
First.
Yeah.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, professional services contract agreements.
Yes, pursuant to recent action taken by the board, 2 professional service contract agreements have been prepared as attached to my report. Both have been executed by representatives of the assessing and auditing firms that they represent. Both contracts are structured to provide for an initial 2-year term with the ability to extend for 2 years. That is in keeping with our purchasing policy. The form is based on what I would consider to be our standardized professional services agreement format, and both are generally consistent with contracts that had expired or will be expiring with both companies. So I'm seeking approval through 2 separate actions for the supervisor and clerk to execute the contract agreement with Northern Assessing Consultants and Services, and also approval for the supervisor and clerk to execute the contract agreement with Stevenson and Company.
Comments? Is there a motion to approve the contract agreement with Stephenson and Company?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Gieske. Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, is there a motion to go forward with Northern Assessing?
I would move that we go ahead with Northern Assessing.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, memorandum of understanding for the Wordsmith Airport Authority Building and Sewer.
Yes, there is a memorandum of understanding regarding sanitary sewer structure attached to my report. The infrastructure in question is within the Oscoda Wordsmith Airport Authority. During a building expansion project that took place this summer, a question came up regarding a 3-inch sanitary sewer line, and this is a mini force main, if you will, connected to a pump station, servicing building 5092. The line runs under the foundation of the neighboring building on its path to building 5092, and I've attached a map showing the general layout. As you might expect, there was some discussion as to whether it made sense to leave that line in service. However, it was determined that the small pump station servicing the line would require replacement if the pipe was to be rerouted due to inadequate pumping capacity. The building that is serviced does not make use of sanitary sewer service at this point. They have indicated, however, that they would like to preserve that option moving forward. There was also some question about who would be responsible for this infrastructure since it's well outside the public right-of-way. It was ultimately concluded that investment in a new pump station was not merited, and input was sought from the township because we obviously operate the primary sanitary sewer system, the main system within the district. The net result of that discussion was development of the MOU which clarifies the fact that the infrastructure outside the public right-of-way for buildings 5091 and 5092 would be the responsibility of the airport authority. I should note also, in considering this topic, that a second backup line was installed also under the building, but inside an encased pipe. So folks were trying to think ahead and have a plan B in the event the original pipe fails, if it is ever put back into service. So with all that, I'm seeking authorization for the supervisor and clerk to execute the memorandum of understanding, essentially clarifying the understanding that was reached earlier this year. And really, it was a situation where the construction was ongoing, and we were trying to find a way to make the project move forward in a timely fashion.
Any comments?
Bob, do we know who occupies that building offhand?
The one that the service is connected to is under the jurisdiction of the Air Force.
Oh, the Air Force.
My understanding is it's cold storage now, but that could change in the future.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I'll move.
I'll support it. Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, our air compressor purchase.
Yes, attached to my report are 3 quotations for a new air compressor. The equipment would service the north end of our DPW building on McNichol Street, the maintenance barn. This is the area where a new hoist was installed recently, and we've essentially located the service bay to that area, for lack of a better term. The existing air compressor dates back to the 90s. It does still work, but given the distance from where it is now to the other end of the building, the pressure is not adequate, and it runs an inappropriate amount of the time. So the new compressor would go right in the area where the service is taking place. We would use the older compressor at the other end of the building to meet needs until it eventually becomes non-functional. So the lowest of the 3 quotes was $23.99 for a Napa industrial air compressor, and that is the recommendation.
Comments? There a motion?
I make the motion that we purchase the Napa industrial air compressor for $23.99.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Gieske, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Byer,
Yeah, yes. I'm wondering, this is on sale, so the savings is $920. That's, what, around a third of the price? Is it a closeout item or something like that?
I don't know.
Don't know.
I'm not aware that it is.
Okay.
They were quite pleased to get it at that price.
That's beyond just a sale price, though, you know. I vote yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, real estate RFP.
Okay, thank you. At the August 14th, 2017 meeting, I provided an update to the board in regard to the RFP that was issued on June 12th to retain the services of a real estate company to market the township-owned properties that the board had determined to be surplus. As previously shared, the RFP was distributed to vendors located within Oscoda Township, as well as the members of the Northeastern Michigan Board of Realtors. Unfortunately, there were no bids received in response to our solicitation. Discussion at the August meeting provided direction to staff to solicit information in regard to the possibility of using an auction service marketing of using an auction service marketing the properties. I spoke to 2 different companies that offered auction services, one of which is the company that is used by the state called Title Check LLC. They did provide a brief overview in regard to what that process would be in an email form, and I included that in my report. The representative from Title Check suggested that an August auction time frame has the potential to yield the most participation. Since that August 14th meeting, we have had several board members contacted by local area real estate companies that provided feedback that if the board would consider reissuing the RFP with an evenly split commission between the listing and selling agencies, they would possibly be interested in responding to the RFP. So at this time, I'm seeking direction from the board in regard to the potential next step in this process.
Comments?
And what are the percentages of,
In the RFP that we called for to begin with?
yeah,
Okay. It was 12% total, and it was 4% to the listing agent and 8% to the selling agent. And I think, I mean, if you want to speak on it, Mr. Palmer, but I mean, in a nutshell, we ask for quite a bit from the listing agent. You know, you have to come up with a fair market price, there's signs involved, there's marketing, so there's obviously costs involved in that. I mean, I'm sure they're gonna try their darndest to then sell the property as well, but if they weren't the selling agent, then they would receive, the way we had structured it, quite a low commission compared to the selling agent that could just maybe do one showing and sell the property. So they, you know, there has been comments that if it was split evenly, so 6 and 6, or the board could go back and change the, you know, the original 12% that they talked about. Completely up to you.
Yeah, that was the comment that I got from a couple realtors, is that this is unlike, like if one of us lists our house, an agent would come in and take the listing, they'd put a sign out in front, they'd do the research on your house, and the listing agent would have the listing. That would be the extent of their work. For this project, we have all of the properties, and it's quite extensive, the number of properties that we have that the township owns. Would require them doing all the investigation on all those properties, putting signs on all those properties. Just the investment in signs alone would be significant. And that was the indication that I got from a couple realtors, was that they'd be happy to do it, but they felt that if anything, it should be a little heavier on the listing agent. But they both said that if it was split equally, 6% and 6%, that there would have been more response to RFP. So I personally would like to see us reissue the RFP. The information you got on the auction was excellent. That sounds like a very good company and would be a way to go as a alternative to RFP for properties that maybe we're not able to sell through our local realtors, and then use that as a backup a year or two down the road. They'll always be around to do the auctions. Personally, I would like to send the business to our local realtors if the board agrees to that, and give them the opportunity to make some of these sales.
Any other comments? Is that the only change?
I was gonna say, the
You think
RFP
it's
actually
enough?
calls for a 2-year contract as well, so I don't know.
I think a 2-year contract would be fine. That gives them the opportunity to do some marketing. I mean, this is commercial property, so it takes a little more in-depth marketing to move some of these properties.
The realtors seem to have given you both this understanding about the percentage, but what about that 2-year contract? Is
I
that
don't think that's a problem.
not a problem?
I haven't received any comment in regard to a contract.
All right.
I was just pointing out, you know, that we call for a 2-year contract.
Yeah, no, I understood. Just wondering if we have any.
I would issue
Anyone?
the same RFP with just a different commission structure,
Very
6
good.
and 6.
I mean, we are kind of going into, it's November, so I don't think a lot of people are looking for properties
but
right
this-
now, so this would be a,
If we can pick a realtor here in the next several months, that gives them the winter time to do their research on the properties and get the signs together, so that when spring comes, they're
Well, that's what I just mean, yeah, with 2 years, I mean, we're kind of, the first couple months is not going to be real great for whoever does get this to push as it
Right.
is, so, yeah.
Right.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I would move to reissue the RFP with commission at 12% split equally between listing and selling agents at 6% each.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, on a medical tenant lease.
Okay, thank you. The Oscoda Valley Community Mental Health Services currently occupies 2 suites in the Awney Medical Building. These suites total approximately 3,942 square feet and are located at the east end of the building. Their annual rate of lease is $33,507, or $8.50 a square foot. The current lease term was just over 2 years and was established to accommodate their October 1st new fiscal year. In late August, I began discussions with a representative from Oscoda Valley in regard to their desire to renew their current lease. A request was made to have Oscoda Valley consider an increase in the lease term and rate. The proposal was outlined in an email correspondence that I attached to my report. The lease term was suggested to increase from 2 years to 3 years in order to accommodate or bring in alignment another lease in the building, which was the Veterans Affairs CBOC lease. The increase in lease rate was derived by reviewing the consumer's price index and computing the inflation rate from the time the existing lease rate was established in 2011 and comparing that to 2017 and applying that percentage to the lease rate. This formula established a new lease rate or proposed lease rate in the amount of $9.30 a square foot. And then we also proposed originally a 3% increase to accommodate inflation over years 2 and 3 of the proposed lease term. Due to the way Oscoda Valley receives its funding, they were unable to approve the stepped approach to the lease rate. That being said, the amount that was originally proposed as the year 2 rate in our proposal, which was $9.60 a square foot, was accepted. And that $9.60 a square foot would basically provide the same net effect that the township would have gained had we looked at the stepped approach in the 3-year. So this evening, I am seeking, I've made those changes to the lease, and actually I updated, Mr. Palmer pointed out I had some incorrect math in the proposed lease, so I did make those changes. That's on, that first page is the only thing that changed in the proposed lease. That's on the table tonight. But we did increase the lease term from a 2 to a 3-year, and then it did increase to $9.60 a square foot. So, and we have received confirmation from Oscoda Valley that they would sign that lease, in that capacity. If the board's inclined to approve it tonight.
Comments?
Did they fight you too much on that price increase?
No, not really. No. We just explained, they have a budget and we have a budget and things, utilities have gone up and so on, and they were understanding. They just needed to, because the way, again, that they receive, that they need to know what they're signing up for at the
Yeah.
beginning of the year. So they were okay with the $9.60, knowing that it wasn't gonna increase, each year, that they have to go out and get funding. So, no, they were okay with it.
And like you said, that works out to be the same amount as our tiered structure that you
Yes.
suggested, because instead of 930 the first year, 960 the second, and 990 the third,
It's just a
960
consistent
straight
960 the entire time, right? So, no, they were good.
What is the, I don't know why I'm asking this, but I'm curious.
Well, I don't know if I'm gonna answer it then, if you don't know why you're asking.
You have the right to stonewall my question.
All right.
What is the source of Oscoda Valley's funding?
I don't know that. Well, how quick I could answer
Lee?
that. They operate by a board. I think somebody is here in the
Yes.
room that might know the answer to that, but I don't know.
They give roughly 90% of the state, 10% from the 3 counties that were affiliated.
And 0 from federal, right? Okay. I guess where I'm going is you're comparing with the Veterans Affairs, that's a federal deal, and
I'm not comparing the lease amount, because actually the lease amount that the VA pays is quite a bit more because we provide additional services in that lease. What I was comparing is the lease term to bring it in alignment. So we had a 5-year term with the VA. And so if we make this a 3-year, that puts them expiring at the same time. So it's just kind of keeping it consistent, there. So the lease amount is not even close to being the same.
okay. I'm concerned. I don't want to price anybody out. We've lost a huge tenant here, or we are going to.
In theory, we have the potential to lose a tenant, yes, because they're building a building downtown.
That's why I asked, were they okay with this
Right.
price list? 'Cause,
And when J.E. Johnson assisted us with the VA expansion, they looked at lease rates, from here to from here to Saginaw and establishing that lease rate with the VA. And they could find comps at $11 a square foot. So I think what we're proposing, it's a very nice, I believe it's a very nice space. It has adequate parking, it's a nice building. And I know when the board of Oscoda Valley toured it, they were very impressed with the space that they were going into there. So it's a nice space for their employees as well as their consumers that come in.
I thought Oscoda Valley made it very clear they were gonna move regardless.
Alcona?
Oh, Alcona,
Yeah.
okay.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I meant when
All
I
right.
said we were losing a major tenant.
Right,
Sorry, I got that mixed up.
Yeah.
yeah. I was gonna say.
Do you know, Ann, do they have any plans to expand when Alcona Health moves out?
Oscoda Valley?
Yes.
I've been speaking with them since actually the VA moved to the other side of the building. They're aware of that space being open, and then, we're planting seeds, obviously, in regard to the Alcona leaving as well.
Because they're leasing 3,900 and some square feet, but there would be significant additional footage available there.
Right, they did just make a huge investment to their building on Cedar Lake Road, so I'm not sure how much more they can expand, but I've definitely had those conversations and will continue to do so.
Something to hope for in the future.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I want to move to approve the execution of the 3-year lease with Oscoda Valley Community Health at the amount of $3,153.60 per month.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed.
Thank you.
Next, resolution on ordinances. Ordinance 2017-260, medical marijuana, for the first reading and publication.
Yes, and we might also want to talk about the public hearing process. But presuming that we would like to move forward with adoption of the ordinance, that would be the procedure, is to conduct the first reading this evening, have it be published, and then bring it back at the next meeting to consider adoption and then final publication. In terms of public hearing, there had been discussion relative to the confusion about the date this evening, and I think the direction that is being suggested this evening is that we consider another public hearing at the next board meeting, so that anybody who did not get an opportunity to come this evening due to that confusion has another crack at it, so to speak.
So that means you would have a third public hearing, and then you would vote on it a few minutes later. Because we only have one,
That's correct.
it's not the best scenario in my mind, but,
Well,
I'm-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sure, I might take an opportunity to speak because it's my error that's caused the confusion. Like Bob said, I mistakenly put the wrong date in the public notice for the newspaper. So probably any process we take from here is a deviation from the most ideal. So my apologies to everyone involved for that. But I think, like Bob mentioned, it's important to try and let everybody have a chance to speak on the topic, and not let the mistake, rob them of that.
Okay.
So I agree, it's not the most ideal, but ideal has gone out the window due to circumstances. So again, my
Well,
apologies, but
And the fact is, we've had several public hearings on this matter, so, not only here, but at the planning commission level as well, so,
How many of the planning commission?
two.
2, so that would make it
five in total.
5.
Five total.
5 public hearings total. The legal one has already been taken care of. So this tonight's, and if we do another one, will be courtesy for the public.
Right.
So regarding the first reading,
Yes. Would you like me to proceed? All right, this is ordinance number 2017-260, an ordinance to authorize and regulate the establishment of medical marijuana facilities. The Charter Township of Oscoda hereby ordains, Section 1 is purpose and intent, Section 2 is definitions, of which there are many. Section 3 is authorization and location of facilities. Section 4 is general standards, uses, and restrictions. Section 5 is requirements and procedures for issuing permits. Section 6 is permit renewal. Section 7 is applicability. Section 8 is penalties and enforcement. Section 9 is severability. Section 10 is effective date.
all right, so would the board like to have a second public hearing on the 27th of November?
I think that's fair, considering the circumstances. I appreciate that, Mr. Nordine. Yeah, yeah.
I'll make a motion. We do the second public hearing, November 27th.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Mr. Nardine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Need a motion on the second reading? Okay. Anything further for that one?
Believe so.
All right, then we move on to other. First is road committee recommendation.
Okay, our road committee met on November 7th to consider projects for the upcoming fiscal year. There has been discussion in the past regarding Colbath Road and Lakeview Drive. That area is very similar to the project we just completed earlier this year, that being Alexander Road and Shorewood Drive. Accordingly, we had procured cost estimates based on the same approach, where the initial segment off F41 of Colbath Road would be seal coat, then asphalt from that point to the end of the road, and then Lakeview Drive would be a third segment, also asphalt. The total local cost of those segments would be $90,000, of which the residents would be responsible for $33,243. At this point, there is some question as to exactly how the project will work financially. You might recall with Alexander Road, it was a combination of property owner contributions and special assessments. The committee is aware that that's going to need to be worked through, but they believe that those should be the priority projects for 2018. and they're fairly represented in the budget that we are considering adopting for next year. There's also an estimate being sought for North Lake Drive off Elk Lane. We've attached a letter from property owner. It's possible that that would be an additional project depending on how the financial plan plays out and what the cost is. So basically, the feedback that the committee is seeking this evening is to prioritize for 2018 the Colbath Road and Lakeview Drive projects. I note also that they have asked that we acquire seal coat estimates for the entirety of the project, so those numbers could go down if that is ultimately the direction that's established by the committee, the board, and the residents in concert.
I would just caution the board that the figure $90,002 is the cost for the whole project. That's everything. That's the county's contribution, everything. It's not our cost. Okay, our cost, if they were to go with seal coat for the first distance through the state forest land, which we did on Alexander, and then regular full asphalt for the other two parts, which is the most expensive scenario, the township's cost would be $56,728, not $90,000. And there's so many variables on this. Maybe asphalt on Colbath and Lakeview, which parallels Colbath down at the very end. Maybe they would decide that there's not enough traffic there that they can get along with what they have now, or maybe they would say in that part, seal coat. There's just a lot of variables. So, but again, if we were to go asphalt, which is the most expensive, our cost, the township's cost would be $56,728. How long do you think before we can get some estimates on seal coat?
I have made a request, so I would guess a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Is Lakeview Drive going to be like Shorewood and do a special assessment, or that's going to be?
Yes, it would be a special assessment if they go for seal coat or asphalt.
Okay.
Yes. For those of you that have driven down there and are fairly familiar with it, there is, for lack of a better word, there is kind of an island of nicely paved residential area there that would not be part of a special assessment, but we would hope that, they're going to have to drive this road to get in and out of their home. We would hope that there would be some voluntary money kicked in like there was with Alexander, but it's really strange. You go in there and then all of a sudden, bang, here's this beautiful pavement, a little branch off Colbath. So someone at the meeting indicated that before the developer of that could go ahead with his project, the source of his money insisted that there be paved streets. And that's why the little island of asphalt pavement. Anyway, any other questions that anybody has about this from the board? Okay. I urge you to check it out if you haven't. It's...
Have the residents been approached concerning asphalt or seal coat
Not
or-
individually yet, because we want them to be able to see what A costs and what B costs.
Yeah.
We don't have that information yet. I would say that the attendance at our road meeting on the 7th was, I thought, substantial. There are some people here tonight that were there. And anyway, that's our project for 2018, you know.
Well, I was thinking one advantage that the residents have is now they have something they can go and drive on and compare on Alexander to know what the seal coat would
Yeah.
actually be like.
Right.
Whereas before that, I don't know that too many people really would know what a seal coat as opposed to asphalt would be, but now they have a very good example of what it'll be, and I will say that's a very nice road with, time will tell how it holds up, but right now it's considerable improvement over what was there.
Yeah.
We were actually only limited in Iosco County for seal coat. The Iosco County Road Commission refused to do seal coat in the past. Other counties, though, were good with seal coat. But since Oscoda is very sandy, our road commission decided to make an exception for us.
One other little caveat of that, our meeting was on the 7th, and I would like to take credit, not me personally, but the committee, for what happened the very next day. I happened to go out there again, I went out on the 8th, and here's the county plowing up all the old crappy, seal coat, and I'm thinking, boy, some of these people are probably thinking, those guys really act fast, you know. We had nothing to do with that. You know? So, but, yeah, they're out there grading the road and knocking off all the bumps, and kind of returning it to gravel, but, no, that was just a coincidence, so. Why did I say that?
You want a motion for obligating the funding?
I'll move that we obligate the funding to Colbath Road project.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Cummings.
Clarification, that presumably would include Lakewood Drive.
Yes.
Lakeview,
Lakeview.
I'm sorry.
roll call.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes, right.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, superintendent employment contract update.
Essentially, what we have here is an updated document. The board had approved a year's extension back on October 9th. So I provided a copy of the updated version versus the one executed last year. The changes involve dates, the salary, and the term in the first paragraph of section 2 there. So it has been handled a couple of different ways. In the past, it's been just modified and executed, and other times brought back to the board. So we thought, in the interest of playing it safe, if you will, bring it back with the changes so everybody's aware of them.
Any comments?
It's roughly a 4% increase in salary, is that correct?
It's actually 2%. It wasn't updated before. It's 2% year to year.
Right,
So, yeah.
yeah, 4%.
And that number reflects my salary currently. So when this extension actually becomes effective, depending on the budget process, it could change an additional 2%, to be clear.
But that's in line with other employees in the
Correct.
township.
Correct.
Reflect the same percentage increase. Okay.
Any other comments?
I would just like to mention, the figures, the salary figures that we're talking about here, $85,000 roughly, a little more. And if some people think that's excessive or something, if you compare it to the school,
Superintendent?
superintendent of the schools, I believe, makes in excess of 100,000 to run a school system.
Yes, he did.
And that is, I was part of that in this town for 34 years, and it's complicated and stuff, but Bob's job involves 7,000 people in Oscoda Township, the biggest township in the county, as far as population and area and roads and on and on. So, I think the comparison speaks well for what we're paying him. I'm not trying to imply the school superintendent is overpaid, because I know what they make in other towns too, but it is considerably higher than what we're talking about here.
Yep.
Any other comments? Is there a motion for the supervisor and clerk to execute contract?
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, Oscoda Asable Senior Center Building Authority reappointment.
Yes, attached is, thank you, relative to the contract.
Welcome back.
Correspondence from Robert Hodges, who is one of our representatives on the Building Authority. Mr. Hodges is actually the chairperson and has indicated a willingness to serve. His term is coming due here shortly. I've provided some background information regarding the Senior Building Authority. Some of you may not be familiar with it or its mission. So I thought that might be helpful, and I note also that in addition to Mr. Hodges, we have one other vacancy we will need to be talking about in the future here. So the purposes of this evening, the consideration would be Robert Hodges.
Comments? Is there a motion?
I move that we extend the term of Robert Hodges.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Gieske. Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Just to make a comment that there is an opening on this commission. So if anybody wants to volunteer or has any names that they would like to submit for this, then please get a hold of the township superintendent and he will relay that to me.
I thought I tried to do that and I couldn't because I was a board member or something. Was it this one? Maybe it was something else.
Probably it was deemed to be a potential conflict of interest. I think we had a board member serving on this body previously and steered away from that. I can double check the documentation and
Okay,
confirm
I'm pretty
that.
sure, yeah. Okay.
All right, next, Air Force correspondence regarding the GAC plant location.
Yes, we have a letter from a representative of the Air Force. It's follow-up to discussion that our supervisor alluded to early on in the meeting with Air Force representatives and Airport Authority representatives. They are identifying certain options for location of the plant as a result of those discussions and indicating that they would like feedback by this Wednesday, specifically as to whether the township would, and/or the Airport Authority, would allow the property to be used without cost, because that was one consideration raised in discussions, was cost factors relative to lease of the land and/or use of the sanitary sewer system. So the question is, would we be willing to consider a lease at no cost to the Air Force on these sites? It is my understanding that only option B really directly affects the township, well, options A and B. Are the sites that we had objected to initially. B is essentially behind the Awney Medical Center, if you will. And C and D are near the benzene plant in the case of C, and D near the POL yard, either in or adjacent to. So we will be talking with the airport authority. We've already begun discussions with them. They'll have to weigh in on this also. So it looks like there is potential relief in terms of moving away from option A, which was our concern, if we can show some flexibility on the lease question.
Their option A for parcel 26, what they staked out was not within the yellow area. It was below that border line. For the pink area, which is right behind the Awney Medical Center, that was an area considered for groundwater injection. The blue area was considered for a pump housing. And then two areas within the POL yard, one by the number 21 and the other one up the road by the word Huron, were selected for pump houses. So either the injection area would be used and the pump houses would be in one of those areas, or no water injection if they find that it doesn't work, if it's too close to some of the other curtains, the extraction curtains. Then they would pump into the storm sewer that runs down California Street. We gave them the option that they could either lease that line, or since we had considered abandoning the storm sewer in the future, that they could just take ownership of the line. They didn't really express anything regarding ownership of the line. It's just, they seemed hesitant towards that.
So if they don't go with their original site A, the originally proposed site, you're saying that they would possibly need to use all three of the other?
Two
Two.
spots.
Okay.
So the pink for injection.
Okay.
And then one of the three spots,
Either
two
or.
in the green and one in the blue. They'll pick one from one of those three of where to put a pump house.
Okay, gotcha.
They did not want to do any sort of remediation of the POL yard with removing the berms and old fuels infrastructure that's under there. Concrete slabs, any of that.
So they just want to leave that.
Right, they want to leave their old stuff behind.
And we know that there's no plan to remove that in the future as a point.
We
to be
did,
clear.
we did express with their system that we wanted an exit plan. We don't want it to turn into, we want a continuous maintenance on it. We don't want it to turn into blight like the sparging system that's located behind the community center.
Yep.
So, for me, my opinion on this is if they're gonna do Site 26, then I think they should be paying a lease on that since they're taking prime real estate away from the township.
Agreed.
Whereas these other areas are small lots, they don't take up much. One's, of course, possibly right next to the benzene plant.
Yep.
And I would be willing to offer those with no lease rate. But if they're gonna go into the storm sewer, I think they need to do a lease rate or claim ownership of it.
I would agree that either C or D options, are you willing to allow them to use that property? If they'd be willing to enter an agreement where they would, at the end of the life cycle of those facilities, that they would incur the cost of removing them. I mean, we're talking probably, maybe possibly 30 years down the road, but still, at some point, when they're done using those facilities, they need to be removed.
Sure.
And in terms of the storm sewer, if they wanted to take ownership of it, that could potentially not be a cost for them. I mean, I don't know, but at least it would be in there. If something happened to it, it'd be up to them to take care of it. I would prefer to see the injection process. That was stated to me at the orientation, that that's a better system. If that's possible to do, I would prefer to see that happen, but I would like to see, option A just taken off the table. I think that's too prime of right next to our community center and the housing there. I mean, that's just not a good spot for
Yep. Here, here.
that kind of a facility, in my opinion.
The DEQ, mentioned this important piece of information, was the DEQ expressed, their water quality department expressed they wanted to use the storm sewer system because they're not sure if this injection system if it is going to affect the plumes surrounding it. If it's going to cause some sort of redirection or whatever. There's unknowns with that.
Whereas in the original site where they're using it, it's on the edge of the base, and they're using it as a curtain. I can see how that would make sense.
I don't know what data they use to justify it for the one by Clark's Marsh.
Okay.
So, but just mentioning what DEQ had said. That would be between DEQ and the Air Force. And as far as removal, they did say that they would do the removal according to DEQ regulations.
Okay.
But I believe right now those regulations call for a capping of wells, not full extraction of the wells. Is that, do I remember that right? Yeah.
What about the buildings themselves?
I don't know what their regulations are on that.
Because it would be nice if they would remove whatever buildings they put up.
It'd be nice for removing every bit of it, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the building removal makes clear sense. I think that's a given at this point. The part a couple things that concern me. I kind of hate the idea of just pulling water out of the ground, in an attempt to try to filter it out and then just start dumping into a sewer line. Yeah, I just kind of find that annoying. I'd rather have reestablished a clean water table underneath the base, but I understand if the DEQ has concerns about that. I don't want to cause worse problems, with the migration of the plumes. I can appreciate the concern, but it's unfortunate, I guess. I hate just throwing water away. But I think it forces us to have to make them own the sewer lines because we certainly, as a township, aren't going to want to be paying for the repairs and damage caused by this rather significant usage that they're going to be putting through the sewer lines for years to come.
Decades.
Decades, thank you. Thank you. I think it's an ownership thing. They've got to take it back.
One comment that was said was that putting that much water through it would help keep it clean.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe that's what we should do in Washington.
So, any other comments regarding this?
So where are we at in terms of the Air Force? They're waiting for we need to give them a recommendation on one particular parcel, or?
Yes. According to the letter, it
Yes.
says
We need
they
to
need
get-
their decision by 2 days from now.
Right. So, yeah, they want to know if we're actually any of those 4 parcels, the B, C, and D options.
So is the question before the board now whether we take A off the list and whether we do options of B, C, D? I mean, how do we want to work our way through this
The
decision?
decision now is going to be, are we going to allow B, C, and D with no lease,
Okay,
and then whatever in regards to the storm sewer?
got it. Okay. All right.
I agree with what you had previously stated. I'm okay with B, C, and D. free of charge to the Air Force, no lease. But the wear and tear that they put on the storm sewer, I think, requires something, either a lease or ownership by them.
Right, well, then I guess, fair enough, I agree. Then, so then I'll move that we offer the Air Force options B, C, and D. And do we want to cross the bridge right now about storm sewer? All right, then to include with the motion that, and require them to take ownership of the storm sewer at one or multiple of those locations.
Just require ownership, or also if they do decide to go for a lease?
Well, they precluded that according to the letter here, but if they want to reconsider, I guess that comes
I
back
just
to us.
want to make sure we cover,
Well, fair enough. I guess if they want to lease it, then I think we'd have to discuss price before we could say yes. I wouldn't take it for $1.
correct.
Well, if possible, I would like to include the remediation of the buildings at the end of the
Oh,
life
thank you
cycle.
very much, yes, and thank you. Good point. That's right. So we have the additional rider.
Just the buildings?
And the property.
Well, this is like the community motion here, so thank you all very much.
One other variable here, I believe C and D are under the jurisdiction of the airport, so we would need their concurrence also.
Oh, very good point on that, thank you. That's
So
right.
we're just saying we think B, C, and D are a good idea.
We're
We
offering
support
it
the
up.
idea of no cost, no lease.
Yep,
But
okay, we're offering it up.
And then whatever further authorization from the airport authority,
Yes.
whichever under their jurisdiction.
Correct, yeah.
okay,
That's
yeah.
quite a motion. Would you like me to restate that?
Well,
I need to write that one down.
Yeah, really, huh?
John's been writing.
yeah, I'll read what I have. See if you still want to make the motion. Offer the Air Force, motion is to offer the Air Force locations B, C, and D at no cost, and require ownership or lease of the storm sewer. Also including remediation of the building and land upon termination of the treatment
Can we change buildings to facilities?
facilities.
Yes, that's right. And I guess end of contract is, I guess, what it would be. But I think the point about the lease is that we would have to then come back and discuss. So we're not open to a lease until we know what the number would be. Is that right?
We've got potential lease. I don't
Okay, fair
know
enough,
if-
yeah, okay, fair enough. I'm still willing to make that motion.
In the wording of that, instead of not end of contract, but at the end of remediation?
Where- But again, the
Contaminant
contract,
remediation.
the contract usually renews and et cetera until they finally get it done, so I guess, I don't know.
I don't think there's a contract for the remediation. I think that's based on permitting.
I see. Then end of remediation makes better sense. Thank you.
So instead of offering the parcels, do we want to say we will be supportive of no lease conveyance, all the above being subject to concurrence of the airport authority?
Yes.
Not to complicate things here, but
Just rewatch the YouTube video.
Yeah,
and-
we're beyond
That horse left
maybe I'm
the barn.
failing miserably.
Yeah, there we are.
Just want to make that distinction clear.
It's a fair point.
Yeah.
I agree. I do want to say, since, not to bellyache more about the Air Force, but given now that they've given us 2 days beyond tonight to get this information to them, they were very clear at the first meeting on the day of the RAB that we were actually making their contractor that they had awarded the project to build the GAC facility in August. We were making them late in August, where I believe the township only found out that they wanted a GAC facility in August.
Yeah, like the
And that,
11th, yeah.
and that call came not from anybody of particular elevation, but actually came from Mr. Rakowski. as, oh, by the way, did you know that we want to take this location, parcels
Really?
23 and 26?
This was
Correct?
after they already staked the property.
Yes. So here what I'm trying to point out is, we're making them late when they awarded the contract and then went, oh, by the way, I think we should ask the township. So I'm here to say, I'm not willing to be unkind and delay this, but it all goes back to that point I love making, and that is the disingenuousness of the Air Force in this process. So I'm trying to make sure that the township's interests are covered here. And I appreciate Mr. Stalker's advice on the legalese.
Yeah, we did make it clear that, in asking them, why didn't you come to us 4 months ago with this
Yep.
instead of so late in the process?
Yes.
And they kind of rolled around that question a little bit, but
No,
well, the
but
next
it-
time, they might want to plan ahead a little further.
Yeah.
And that we made it clear that we did not want them to have any delays, but they need to plan ahead a little better.
Yep.
And even in this case here, in selecting these properties, we wanted them to actually do some research and find out other properties that would work for this. And they didn't. They pretty much just said, well, what do you guys think?
Ah, yes.
All right, so the motion's been made by Mr. Cummings.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings,
After all that, yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, the winter 2017 newsletter.
On the board table is a more font-friendly version, hopefully. We had talked about the newsletter at the pre-board meeting, and suggestion was made that some modifications be made. So, given our past practice, we are looking to distribute the newsletter with the tax bills, which are coming up rather quickly, with any changes that the board thinks are necessary and appropriate.
I wish to point out that the links shown under MICTV here, of the first one, just to the left of the logo, is completely user unfriendly. No one would ever in their right mind type that in. It would be great if this was an electronic letter that you could click your mouse on, but my finger doesn't do that real well. Second is that the link at the very bottom that says well, it's the very bottom of that box, that link actually doesn't work. I actually tried it on the browser tonight before the meeting. So that link is incorrect and goes nowhere. There's no such channel. So anyway, so that needs to either be fixed, or we just take the links out, or we come up with some shorter way to, some way to make it a little easier to use.
I had noticed also there's a header just below the section Mr. Cummings was talking about, entitled Code Enforcement Reminder. Thought making the change to Code Compliance Reminder, keeping with our earlier initiative.
Yes.
Ah, very good. Good catch.
Any others?
I'm hoping, Mr. Cummings and Mr. Stalker, our little committee, the Alpha and the Omega Committee, that if we are successful at all, a lot of this will go away, right? I hope, please. Wow. We're trying to come up with a plan where the meetings will be televised like they used to be. Turn to channel 90, there we are, replays, all of that, so.
Right.
So,
Anything else?
I'll make a motion that we accept the newsletter with the corrections.
Support. Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, resolution numbering change.
Yes, I can speak about this if you.
Yes.
All right. Some time ago, I don't remember which meeting, the last meeting or possibly the one before, there was a resolution that came before the board laying out the process that the board would take to adopt the medical marijuana ordinance. That resolution, the night of the board meeting, was numbered 2017-20. When it came time for me to record the resolution, I noticed that the number was out of sequence. Its rightful number is 2017-21. So I made the change, and this is just to inform the board that that change was made.
Very good.
Okay.
All right, the next is natural gas Center Point Energy.
Yes, the board had previously authorized entering into an agreement with CenterPoint Energy based on the proposal they'd given us. The idea was that a fixed rate over time was considered preferable to the market cost through the regular supplier. It's taken some time to verify accounts and so forth, and I apologize for the last-minute nature of this. We just got the document, I think, on Friday. It would become effective for the December 1 billing, I believe. You should be aware that it has not been submitted to legal review. It's a standardized document, but if we wanted to have it reviewed, I could bring it back at the next meeting. So I wanted to make that clear due to the time constraints. Totally at your discretion. I at least wanted to make you aware we had it in hand.
I have a quick question, just because I'm looking down the list of locations. What is location number 8? It reads 5671 North Skeel Avenue, apartment 1642.
Oh, it,
1842.
I'm sorry, 1842, thank you.
5671 North Skeel is the Ani Medical Building. So I don't know, it is probably, I think
A suite
it's
or
actually
something?
building 1842.
Oh, very good, okay.
I think it's the building number, but I don't quote me on that. But the address is 5671 North Skeel.
Fair enough.
Any other comments? Need a motion for execution?
I move that we execute the Michigan Choice, Gas Choice customer contract presented tonight.
Support. Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
No.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. All right, now we are on to our second public comment period. Anybody may speak. There's still a 4-minute time limit. Please introduce yourself if you come to the podium. Yes, go ahead.
My name is Mary Mertz, and I am a resident of the Colbath Road area. And I would like to thank you all for recognizing the need and dedicating funds for that improvement project. I do have a couple of questions, and so I don't know who to speak with directly. If you can just point me, we don't have to take up board time, but I would like to know a timeline for the project now that the money has been dedicated. Having lived in that area, I do know that all of the residents have to use Colbath Road. Very few of the residents will have to go on Lakeview Drive. So as I work to solicit funds and support for our portion of the bill that will have to be paid. I'm not sure what kind of support I'm going to get for the Lakeview project to be done. I know everybody has to drive on Colbath. Not many of them drive on Lakeview, so I don't know that they will recognize that need. We feel, our address is actually Lakeview, and we feel the road commission does a very nice job of grading it. I don't think it's ever been paved, right, honey? And my husband is here as well. And so I don't know that anybody's unhappy with Lakeview Drive. Colbath, many of us have suffered a lot of car problems from falling in potholes and zigging and zagging and trying to miss them. So if the Lakeview project, even though it has been dedicated tonight, isn't supported by the community, that's okay, right? We get a say. I mean, you're not going to just fix it and then send everybody a bill, right? Do we get an opportunity to have input in that neighborhood? Okay, so just that you've set the money aside doesn't mean that part has to be done. We're thrilled that Colbath is going to be done. Lakeview, I would like the opportunity to speak with all of the residents and see how they feel. I don't know that everybody's willing to support that. Okay, so is Mr. Stalker the person that I should communicate with as we move forward on this?
Yes.
You do the short straw? Okay. I do know the road commission is meeting 1 week from today, and I do intend to go there. I did try to get, sidestep you too and get a chip and seal estimate, but their engineers have to meet because they aren't thrilled with chip and seal, I guess. That takes some convincing on their part. So anyway, I would like to try to get funding for it and move forward, as you all know, the Alexander project, but I just needed to know that we aren't committing to Lakeview if we're all not on board. Okay?
Mary, I think you asked, what's the timeline?
Oh, yeah.
We can't determine that. What they will do is put the paving out for bids, and the company that gets the bid
Okay.
will have other projects in the summer of 18. I understand, for instance, they're going to redo US 23 from the end of the new pavement to Baldwin Township next summer. So whoever gets the bid for the asphalt paving, this will be a small potatoes deal. It's important to you and me,
Right.
but to them, it's nothing. And so they will probably not get to it till September or
Okay. Well, it's
October.
just
Yeah.
helpful when I talk to people that I say
Yeah.
they're thinking of doing it in a year or in a month or,
No,
something
yeah.
just to have an
No,
idea.
we're looking at 18, but when in 18, it's probably going to be toward the end of the paving
Okay.
season.
Thank you again for all of
Yeah.
your time and dedication. to
Mary,
that.
too, that's why I asked about Lakeview and it being a special assessment, because there's a process for that also, because you have to get signatures and that type of thing, and they have to have their hearings, and that takes time also, too. But if you get with Tammy and Bob, Mr. Stalker's office, she would be able to give you that timeline.
If we didn't go with the special assessment, and if the residents don't want it done,
No,
Sorry.
then, we don't have to have a special assessment if the residents fork out the money.
Right.
Right. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak? All right, now we're on to board comment. Does anybody have anything?
I'd like to let everybody know that their winter tax bills have been calculated and they are available in the treasurer's office. And I can print out a copy for you, but I cannot take payment legally until December 1st. It's also available online now, too.
Oh,
Anybody else? I would like to also mention regarding the EMS response times, we do have some support from Oscoda Township and Plainfield Township where they will attend the subcommittee meeting regarding that.
good.
will they be allowed to attend?
The other thing is that we also have an opening for an alternate member on the Zoning Board of Appeals. So if anybody would like to volunteer for that, then please let Mr. Stalker know, and we shall connect. Anything else?
Did we lose a person?
No, we don't have an alternate.
Oh, okay.
I have one. There was a special election on November 7th, Tuesday. Was successful. The millage was successful. The election was successful across Oscoda Township. And I just wanted to offer my thanks for all the workers that worked it and the voters that came out and voted. I thought everyone was great throughout the whole day, so I just wanted to mention that.
Congratulations, your first election.
Thank you. Feels good.
Pretty good turnout, eh, for a one-item election?
I don't have much frame of reference, but it seems that way, certainly.
Yeah.
How many?
Around 800.
Okay.
That's pretty good.
All right, then I need a motion to go into closed session to consider the superintendent performance evaluation, and to go into closed session with Mr. Stalker, since session was called from him.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Mr. Gasky.
Yeah.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, we are now in closed session.